Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Hollywood Breaks. Great to be with you today. Keith and I had this wonderful conversation today about the theatrical experience, what it means for Regal to be shutting down and possibly going to bankruptcy, but this evolution of something great that can come for the format, for the people that enjoy films, and really this overall theatrical thing we love. So, welcome to this episode of Hollywood Breaks. I'm going to tell you something. I went to the movies this last week on Monday.
Good for
To
you.
see Bullet Train with Brad Pitt.
Oh, nice.
It's a good movie. It's a fun movie.
Okay.
I really didn't know what to expect. I basically just grabbed an open seat at a theater that was like, what's the next one playing? Okay, Bullet Train? Sure, I'll just take that and see how it plays out. Super fun. Didn't know really what to expect. Just loved it. But the reason why I went to the movies is I had time, and I thought to myself, I love to watch movies in the theater, right? It's kind of what we talked about here. It's a good way to kind of like take some time away, get some air conditioning, jump in there and watch something. I did have to buy a ticket by myself because it was just me. And then I got into the theater, and my seat, because it's assigned now, right? That's like the new trend. Get your assigned seats, is between people. And the seats, so I have to sit here, my assigned seat, scrunched between the stranger on my right and a stranger on my left. Even though like two people over, there are 4 seats where people didn't show up. And I thought to myself, did we ruin the movie theaters by making it like too luxurious? Did we try to be like, oh, you can reserve your seat and get all this stuff? In reality, I would have enjoyed the movie more if I just would have walked in, looked for an open seat, and grabbed it. So I'm wondering, I wonder if we've changed theaters so much, trying to catch up to or try to make it more luxurious. We're missing some of that normal, like just grab a seat and enjoy yourself kind of experience.
I mean, yeah, I think that's part of it. It does seem like there is an aspect of just showing up that is somewhat a part of the theatrical experience, but I think the reason it was instituted was it was an easy way to try to improve upon the experience without putting any money down, basically.
Yeah, get an app and choose a seat. But now, buying a freaking ticket, it's like buying $100 concert ticket. Sign in, choose your seat, I'm like, I swear we used to just like walk up to the box office, 2 tickets, please, grab the thing, give someone a piece of paper, and you walk in and you kind of just, I don't ever remember like struggling with, having me and my date separated or something like that, because the theater couldn't handle us. I don't know what we're trying to accomplish here.
We've talked a lot about this throughout our almost 100 episodes of Hollywood Breaks, that the experience itself has gone downhill and has not improved. And again, I think that is just one way where they feel like they can make an improvement without having to spend any money. And people feel like, okay, you take sort of like the Arclight, which is, as for those of you who don't know what the Arclight is, it's a chain of theaters in it used to be a chain of theaters. I don't think they're around anymore. I think they went under, but it was a chain of theaters in the greater Los Angeles area, and I think they branched out to Chicago, maybe branched out to one other city, but they were very luxurious. Or comparing it to, you'd walk in, it was easy, there was a bar, you could have food, they only played 2 trailers before every movie, so it was very like, you knew like you weren't going to get bombarded with 10 like you do with like an AMC, and you were able to select your seat, and you would go in and you could sit wherever you wanted. But again, to your point, Tim, you would run into the issue where you'd sit down and then the entire theater is basically empty, and then someone came to sit right next to you, and you're like, really? Because it's an assigned
that's what was assigned to me. Sorry.
That's what was assigned to me. So that's where I go. But again, I think part of the reason that that became a fad, I mean, I think COVID also factors into this as well, being able to, assign a seat. So people, there was buffers back when that was necessary. And
Yeah, buffers.
so I think that may be a part of the thing as well. But it's an interesting thing because I never really thought about it being something that you'd long for, the idea of just walking in and just picking a seat. Like for me personally, that was always a source of anxiety.
Oh,
Like
really?
I was always the one. Yeah, I was always the one who wanted to get to the theater because I love to watch the trailers. And my family was always sort of like, well, we'll get there. It's all right. We're my family was not one known to be on time all the time. So when I'd go to the theater, I was always get anxious about like, where am I sitting? Where are we going to get a seat? Especially if it's like a big movie on an opening weekend, like.
But here's what's
sit?
missing.
I mean,
this sounds so strange, because of course, if you ask me what I would want, I would never want this, right? This is my kids know I would poke my eyes out, or rather poke my eyes out than want this. But this is what's missing, and I think is what's missing in some of the theater environment. We're missing the line. There are no more lines. So big opening weekend, no one is standing around for 2 hours waiting to get in so you can have the seat in the middle. You don't have that energy buildup. You don't have the thought of like, it's exciting. I'm afraid if I don't show up, I'm not going to get the piece of it. There's no buildup. So it's all like super luxury. I mean, the stupid MFers that buy the seat in the middle all the time, I can never get it. I'm like, what the hell? I feel like it's like a black market trade to get the good seats now, because instead of, no, I used fight my way to the front or whatever. So I don't love lines, as I'm saying, but there's something about the entire like energy of the environment that we've turned into, like I don't know what this is. It's too luxury. It's not accessible.
Well, it's funny that you think of that, because one of my fondest memories, and this is going to date me, but not that anyone would be surprised. But I grew up in a very small town outside of Pittsburgh, and we had like 2 theaters in our town, and one was a 3-screen and the other one was a 2-screen, and the 2-screen one would usually run later movies. So we had one theater that would premiere. It was 3. You'd walk in and there were like 3 marquees, each with the name of the movie, and that was it. And there was a little concession stand, and there was a place where you stood to get your ticket, and then that was it. I remember when Batman, the original Burton version, came out, and the place, when my brother and I went to see it, because my brother and I went to see it together, was mobbed. It was mobbed. And I remember that, and just remembering how it just made me you talking just made me think of it. It made me even more excited to see the movie.
Of course.
The place was packed. And I also was just going to say before, previously we were talking about anxiety. When I went to see Titanic the first time, this was like week 2 or 3, because it was
Titanic was the one I was thinking of. Avatar and Titanic were the last ones I think I've seen. Yeah.
Well, I was literally standing in line with my buddies because we had, everyone was talking about this movie, and we're all like, Titanic, really? And I just remember I was anxious because I was like, shit, where am I going to sit? Yeah. What crappy seat are we going to get? Are we going to be way up front? I'm going to be like this the whole time. But yeah, I mean, those are some of my fondest memories. I mean, I still remember my time in LA, when I would go see, I would try to avoid opening weekends just because they were just crazy. And I would go like on a Sunday morning or early Saturday afternoon. And I remember seeing the little the line signs that say for each screening of the big movies, and you knew that that's where people were going to stand. Like the Grove, the AMC Grove, I don't know what it's like now. It used to be Pacific Theaters. I think it's an AMC now. That place was always madhouse on a Saturday. I mean, it was just
Santa Monica 3rd Street Promenade.
Yeah,
you would walk down, and you basically when you got near the theaters, you got a crowd to the left because the theaters were taking up the lines that were there. And there's just something to, I don't know how to like explain it, but I feel like there was some sort of mathematics that we've calculated out of the theatrical world by giving precision to where you're going to sit, how many people are going to be there. So it feels like, oh, we gained efficiency, which we did, right? Standing around in a line is not very efficient. That's why it drives me crazy. we gained all this efficiency, but what we did is what used to be 5 showings became 4 showings. And then you don't get the spontaneous people filling in the blanks, right? So on Sundays there'd have to be 5 screenings of a movie because the ones in the middle would be, or you're afraid to be sold out, so you would jump in 2 more on a Sunday morning. Now, if those 4 are sold out, the theater doesn't realize who's walking away. They don't realize who checked the app, can't buy a seat, and isn't showing up anymore. So I think that theaters are reacting. I don't know.
That's interesting.
It's with Regal going bankrupt, I've just been thinking about like what has changed, and not just what I nostalgically miss, but did we break something along the way with tech? And I don't just mean OTT viewing and screening like Netflix, but like the theatrical experience is a high tech experience. You have to have a cell phone to buy a ticket to go watch a movie, and then they tell you to put your cell phone away, ironically. But it's
interesting because I yeah, you're right. The whole sort of you brought up another scenario that I think I had multiple times when I was going to the theater was you go in and you see the showing you want to see is sold out. So you look there, well, what else is playing?
What else is playing?
Another ticket to another movie.
Yeah, exactly.
And
because you wanted the date with your girl, you didn't care,
right?
If the
you didn't care if the movie was sold. If it was sold, I mean, listen, if you're doing your due diligence, you know whether or not the movie's going to be sold out, and so you. But granted,
but your mom drops you off late, and you can't really get in,
and then you show up, and you're like, oh, we can't go see it, but let's go see this instead.
Yeah,
I mean, it's one of those things where that's another experience, but I think it's where the whole tech side of it comes. I mean, the tech side of it, I think, is the phones, the sort of the convenience of booking the ticket, and then also obviously with the advances in streaming and the ability to watch movies from your phone or from your computer or at home, and not really needing to go in the shrinking windows and all these things that have sort of happened that have just sort of cannibalized the theatrical experience. I think is part and parcel why, as you just alluded to, companies like Regal are looking like they're going to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which means a lot less theaters in the US, which is, I think, for companies like Warner Brothers Discovery that are doubling down on this idea of theatrical, it's going to present a problem for them.
Yeah, it's the viewing experience is part of the overall, I'm going to say, as we've touched like 100 times in 100 episode, really, we've touched it, like the theatrical experience is part of the reason why we call it films instead of TV or something like that, right? Or getting away from this gross word content. It's a disgusting word of like, filler, something to put inside your brain dead mind or whatever is what content means to me.
Yeah.
But like filmmaking has this idea of the audience is part of the experience when you're first screening it and viewing it. So the theatrical moment is there. And that ability or needing to navigate through a crowd. My wife and I recently were in New York. We actually went to a theater show. We watched, I think it was Plaza Suite. Neil Simon's Plaza Suite. Right. And like the bell rings and 300 people are trying to cram themselves through this doorway, and then you enter into a theater and every seat is, it's a couple hundred people, but every seat is filled in, and there's an energy, and there's still drinks and popcorn and all that stuff, but like it's about ready to start, and it's the part of the experience is getting in and fighting your way to the center and watching the show and fighting your way out with these people. And this efficiency of like, the theater I was in on Monday might have had 40 luxury seats, right? So they're the lazy boy, put your feet up, leather reclining things or whatever. But I'm like, wow, are we missing the? Yeah, I mean, we are. We're missing the Star Wars moment when near me, the Cooper Theater, which had a couple hundred seats for the 70 millimeter, the line was wrapping around the block. It just went on forever, and it was people waiting for a show 4 hours from now were standing in line because the current show was playing, and it was like this awesome experience. So I don't know, this evolution to me, you can't reverse any piece of it. That's not what we're saying at all. No. But I think there's many things that create this evolution. of the format, the type of content we're making, the viewing experience, the work that we want to put into, our overall entertainment experience. There's a lot of factors making this thing play out. But it's interesting. That was an interesting moment to me. I'm like, oh man, this kind of sucks. I actually just want to go sit over there in the empty seats.
Right.
And if I
Yep.
sat there and someone showed up, they would think I killed their cat or something like that. They would just think, "Oh my gosh, you're sitting
Yeah,
in
and
my
then you
seat."
miss half the movie arguing with the person about whether or not.
I'm
What
like,
seat are you in? Are you in the right
it
seat?
was just open.
Mine says this.
I'll move back
like
over to my seat. Yeah.
It's the bringing the joy of the airplane experience to your local movie theater, which is always fun.
But so Regal gave it up, huh? Bankruptcy. That's the
word in the Street Wall Street Journal broke it this morning that as we're recording this on Friday the 19th, that yes, it looks like Regal is going to declare bankruptcy, which, as I said, is not spectacular for the theatrical experience in the US. It's owned by the Regal's owned by a UK company called Cineworld. And the Wall Street Journal took, obviously, as they do, with more business side of things, and just mentioned that one of the reasons why is just the lack of product. They just don't have the product. There's just not enough movies coming out. Something that Sean McNulty did a nice deep dive, has done some really good reporting in terms of the dearth of movies over the course of the next 3 or 4 months. Something Richard Rushfield pointed out to it in his column from Wednesday, in his usual chipper self, about sort of the death march that we're walking into in the next few months, because there's just no movies. And so now we have the theaters sort of suffering from that. And then also, our friend of the podcast, Dallas Saunier, the guy, the producer of the latest Gina Carano movie, and the head of Bonfire Legend, posted on his Instagram that, he's not surprised, because the experience of most of the Regal theaters he's been in are garbage. It's just they're not nice. And so it goes again to sort of the twofold problem of what we talked about: the lack of movies to people to go see, and also the fact that the experience has just degraded to the point where people don't feel the need to drop the money that is being asked of them now to go to that experience. And so it's sort of it's the culmination of years upon years of neglect, and obviously COVID threw some of this into stark relief, but at the same time, it's not that surprising.
Yeah, I think he's making an interesting point of the theatrical experience, because and I find this true with almost everything in life, right? So you have one group that's trying to upgrade the experience, so they get these better seats, and you get this thing that goes and then the heat button. You're like, oh, this is so great for like the first year, and then the seat kind of goes and then it tilts to the side, and the heat button doesn't work, and now you're complaining because your heat in your seat and your footrest are not the right reclining angle, and you're thinking, we used to sit in wood seats or whatever, like these little plastic things, and just it was all about the movie, and now it's supposed to be everything else. Or the food you brought me was cold, and my steak was not done medium rare. In the middle of watching a theatrical experience, I feel like the promise was trying to get too high, like they're trying to overshoot it, and now we have even more things to critique than like, shut up, sit down, watch the movie. The movie was everything. I don't remember what my seat felt like when I was watching Star Wars. I don't have any idea. I just know that Star Wars was incredible. So I think that chasing these theaters, trying to chase and compete with home, or try to say, oh, well, the home theatrical experience feels like this, let's replicate that here. Let's just say, like, it was probably good in its time. It's had its moment. And there are still probably some fun experiences that you can get into, like the steakhouse that plays movies or whatever. But for the most part, we should really understand, and I think what we're entering into is a new era where the blockbuster is over, right? We know that it's the end of the blockbuster. The theatrical experience is going to be more intimate, maybe even controlled by studios because of the Paramount decree being dropped. And therefore, the films we're making, the the format of the shows and type of shows we're watching are going to have a different experience as well to get me to want to show up and be there. And then I wondered, like, do we need to drop some of this tech along the way in this new era? Do we need to make it more open, more, dynamic to some degree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely worth looking at. I think so much of what the tech has brought has somewhat, your point was really astute in terms of it making it more about the experience than the movie. And I think that's a big part of the problem. We've talked a lot about this. I wrote about it in my newsletter, sort of this grand experience of walking into a theater and just having that communal experience is part of what going to the theaters is about. We shifted it from this idea of it being a communal experience to this being a very sort of, and I mean, this is more of a commentary on the culture at large, and it's becoming a more of a singular individual experience.
Yeah,
And,
totally
one of
insular.
our phones,
Yeah,
what
no
of
more
our
standing in
phones
lines.
done,
We
yeah,
can
exactly.
deliver the food to your seat. Totally insular.
Right. Yeah. So it's turned everything into an individual experience versus communal experience. I started watching The Offer, which is the Paramount Plus series about the making of The Godfather. And there's this one scene where Miles Teller's character, who's the producer of the Godfather, whose name escapes me, and he's sitting there watching Planet of the Apes. And the scene when Charlton Heston walks up and realizes that the Planet of the Apes is actually the Earth.
Yeah.
And he sees the Statue of Liberty, and you can see Miles Teller sitting there like looking, and everyone's talking in the theater. It's electric because everyone's like, holy shit. It's like, what? It's like, to use a more modern, it's like Sixth Sense when they finally realize Bruce Willis is actually dead. It's like one of those moments when
spoiler
you're in the theater,
alert, by the
like,
way. I'm just
spoiler
kidding.
alert, anybody who hasn't seen it. And it was interesting because then he got up and he was seeing the movie with his girlfriend, and she was like, this is all done. We're going to be watching, TV's future. And he's like, no, you cannot replicate this in your living room. Did you see how they reacted when you can't replicate this. You just can't. And it's right. He's 100% right. You cannot replicate it in your room. I've used the example of Borat. I saw Borat in the theater. I've never laughed so hard in my life. And when I saw it by myself, even though it was the second time, it was not as funny because the crowd around me was rolling in laughter.
Absolutely.
And it was just sort of like that. And again, because of these little devices, everything has now become so singular that communal experiences like going to the theater have just completely been degraded.
The throwback I have and the experience I want every person watching a film to have is a movie premiere where it's the cast and the crew and the energy, and it's electric, and they fill out, Mann's Chinese Theater, and it's packed. And every scene it gets extra laughter and extra joy, like the energy from the crowd because they're so excited and this is the moment and they're looking at themselves. It's just, it's an amazing experience that you clearly can never replicate. And the premiere is like the pinnacle, right? Like everything, even the first screening with your friends doesn't meet the premiere, but the first screening is just as fun. But I think there's something to this. I think you've asked the question recently, like about comedies, like will comedies survive? And I think no, in this current format, we're asking people to stay insular. Like it has to be your joke, and especially comedy itself. Jokes nowadays are so I don't know, pointed. It can be very people can have a very visceral, negative visceral reaction to some people's comedy. But making a film that gets back to understanding, even a romantic comedy, even a situational comedy, maybe this evolution allows for something more intimate again, and maybe something more crowd focused, where we could go back to your Borat experience, or go forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
Meet a new Borat.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up the comedy side of it, and Matt Belloni and his What I'm Hearing had a chat with Chris Bender, he's a producer. He was partnered for years with J.C. Spink, may he rest in peace, who passed away a few years ago. And Bender Spink, and they were the producers of some of the biggest comedies of the 90s and early aughts, like American Pie. I think he was involved in Talladega Nights, or that might have been one he used. But he was talking with Chris because Chris wrote this sort of Jerry Maguire-esque manifesto about comedy and why comedy has sort of like fallen off the wayside. Like you don't see it anymore. You don't see the Judd Apatow, Seth Rogen comedies anymore, that were really
not in the
really
theaters.
great.
They go
Not in the
straight
theaters.
to.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, but you don't really see them that much in streaming anymore. Like name me a comedy that you've seen in the last 3 or 4 years that
Bullet
was
Train.
huge.
No, it's not huge. Yeah, I'm just
That's
kidding.
not a comedy.
It was kind of funny.
But that was funny, but it's not a comedy. It's an action comedy.
Yeah,
So maybe it qualifies a little.
all right.
But he wrote this really. I didn't read it. I would love to read it. So if Chris, you're listening, you would like to send it to me, I'd love to see it. But he made like these 5 points that are sort of very relevant to our conversation. So this is a 5-point wish list is basically what he ended the memo with. And he says, less screens, but a nice theater, like the Arclight, something we've already talked about. And less screens would sort of fit the mantra you're saying, like sort of going back to a little bit more of an intimate environment, fresh talent and new takes on old ideas, which is not necessarily a bad idea, but there's always something that is up for, can be made funny with a refresh. Obviously comedy is also very tricky in our current cultural moment, but I think we're seeing a little bit of, a reset in terms of coming back to the idea of comedy is supposed to not always be lovey-dovey. It's supposed to sometimes be harsh and sometimes offensive, and that's what kind of makes comedy.
Yeah.
And then, the other one, which is relevant to your point about the Broadway shows, it's like comedy should feel like a night out, and he uses Broadway as an example of going to a Broadway theater, what that experience is like. You don't get that at a theater anymore. You just don't, like, because of what the points you all made. You can show up late, you've got your assigned seat, you've got your ticket in your hand, you got your phone in your hand, and that's it. And then you go sit down, and then you're either focused on the comfort of the seat, or if the seat's working, if it's not working, you're not really looking forward to joining the actual.
Yeah. I'll tell you, in the Broadway theater we went to, there weren't seat rests. I mean, I could barely fit in my seat. Little itty bitty
some
things.
Of those are so old. They've been around since like the early 20s.
And there are actual humans on a stage like 20 feet from me. So I can't disrupt the entire, like I'm stuck in a tiny little seat, and I enjoyed it. I laughed out loud, and I didn't complain because I didn't get my Slurpee halfway through or whatever, I think that I actually like the Cinemark thing is basically something we said a couple years ago when Sumter Redstone died. We said, look, it's got at the end of the megaplex, right? We know that the pandemic was going to hurt the megaplex, but the megaplex is also unnecessary. Netflix is just the megaplex on crack or whatever. Like there's plenty of crap out
on
there.
Your TV.
We don't need any of this stuff. Yeah, what we need is centralized experiences that people, a moment that it's worth having. And if it's 1 or 2 or 3 screens, the old Fox style theaters where there was a good enough moment and the theater could stay alive. It doesn't have to make a major real estate investment with a huge technology in order to compete in this space. There's an evolution there. And I think the need for comedies, community events like comedies, playing itself out, like you can see how these items can congregate together. The content needs the space needs the content. That's what's happening there. But that some of this critique about what's driving this bankruptcy, where there's not enough product, totally. There's not enough. I mean, there's plenty of product. It just happened to be on OTT platforms. So there's not enough reason to go to the theater is what they're really saying. Even like we said last week, Prey would have been a really good theatrical experience, but OTT took the wind out of it.
OTT won out in the Kareem Daniel world, so that's why it ended up on Hulu. And again, it goes to the whole Batgirl conversation. Matt Belloni had a interesting what I'm hearing today, where he had 2 different points of view. He had one exec who basically said, it doesn't matter how bad the movie is, you push it out. You've made an agreement with this artist, you have to push it out. You have to get the movie out. That's the agreement you made. You agreed to make this art with this director. Just release it. And who knows, maybe a POS can find an audience. That's been known to happen.
Yeah.
Venom being a very good example, garbage movie, but it made a crap load of money.
Yeah.
And then there's another executive who's like, that's old. That's an old way of thinking. Like, you can't think like that anymore because there are so much competition now. That was fine back 20, 30 years ago when the theater was the experience. You saw a movie / film in the theater. That was the heyday of Scorsese when he was like, that's the, films. That's when you saw films and movies. We knew the difference between a TV movie and a film. Now we don't know what the difference is anymore. And that just goes to the sort of the duality, that sort of the back and forth that we're kind of dealing with now in terms of what is the next step forward. And the problem is, if you have all this content, the quality is going to degrade, and now people are going to be more selective. So now you have to be, I hate to sound cliche, but everyone has said it and it's easy to say it, but it's more difficult to execute it. So you have to make good films.
Yeah. And the volume is, we know Netflix is cutting back. The heyday of their golden era of anything you want to make, someone's going to give you money for. That's coming to an end. So what comes next? Quality. Because quality, when I have finite budgets to spend, I have to spend my money wisely. So I have to get better product for the same dollars.
Yeah.
So the challenge there is, again, if somebody's running out on OTT, we still need to find new outlets, and it's possible the outlet's going to show up somewhere else, theatrical or other places. So this evolution is very exciting. It's kind of fun to have these conversations about it, and obviously kind of cover the topics that are taking place. But I know I know we're on to right track of, hey, if you're Hollywood is breaking, right? So Hollywood is breaking on that side. But if you want to break into Hollywood, there's new opportunities as well. So Hollywood Breaks is very relevant to what's happening in the field. And I don't know. I mean, as I read the Cinemark news of the theaters closing, what are you thinking? Oh, that's a shame. And then you think, I'm not surprised. And I think, is it also bad? It's not, is that what I really want nowadays anyway? So all of those feelings I have with that one piece of news, it kind of leaves me excited. Not that that's too bad, but also, oh, I get it. This is actually this evolution playing itself out, and it's a necessary evolution. So excited to see what comes about.
Agreed.
Speaking of excited, Keith, we're really close to our 100th episode.
I know. 100. Can you believe it? 100. That's insane.
I would think we should look back, because I think we've aged a lot in the last 100 episodes. We should just compare ourselves to our naive.
I think my forehead has gotten a little clearer in the picture for sure. My forehead has gotten a little longer as my hair retreats.
We could probably look at the way we looked. Probably like just the advancement of our technology. I think our cameras have advanced, our lighting.
Cameras have gotten better. Audio has gotten better. So yeah,
just the hosts. The hosts are the only things not improving.
The hosts are the only thing that are going to kind of go like this.
But the Vision Craft Brew is getting better and better every time.
Yes, it's getting better and better. That's right.
I like Vision Craft Brew. Well, that's coming up very shortly, so I think we're gonna be talking to some friends and doing some look backs or whatever. But we're closing on that 100 episode. So
I know.
I think the pressure's on you really to get whatever between now and the 100th to get a couple of really good topics in here so we can.
Topics or guests? I think that was more of a subtle reference to guests. Yeah, whatever. Okay. Yeah, I'll get on that.
Well, my friend, as we count down to 100, it's good to see your face. You're going back home next week?
One more episode in May, and then we're heading south back to Philadelphia. Yeah.
Very good. Well, enjoy your week. Hey, and if you get a chance to watch Bullet Train, it's funny.
I'll just wait till it comes on streaming.
Yeah, I was trying to explain it. My wife would not want to see that movie. It's too Deadpool comedy-ish, and she's like, "That's
my wife definitely wouldn't want to see it." So
yeah,
I got some catching up to when I get back to the land of movie theaters. So assuming mine's still open because it is a Regal. So.
Oh yeah. Enjoy it while you can.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.
You too. See you next week.